which is our real and only enemy. Qatar offers its full support to the new interim authorities in Libya during a visit of the delegation to the country in search of stability after a decade of conflict amid foreign interference. The Libyan Minister of Foreign Affairs said, "We have asked Qatar the return of its diplomatic envoy from Tunisia to Libya, and we have heard great news that will happen soon." Qatar's foreign minister adds that we have agreed on forming teams to evaluate the agreements between the two countries and to also look into the possibilities to offer support and assistance to our brothers in Libya. Well, to something that focuses on our conversation of the day, and the question here is, why are there few girls completing school in Narok County? Well, this is a question that has bothered county education experts, and part of the problem has been the lack of menstrual hygiene facilities and reproductive health information. As a result, many of these girls are getting married younger than they should or falling pregnant and dropping out of school. Now, a group of young men are seeking to change the fate of these girls and are pushing for accessibility of sanitary pads. Bridget Singana reports on how these morons are rewriting tradition, diving into menstrual hygiene matters.
Here in the Masai Mara, life is pristine, untouched by modernity, as Edna Ngoe leads me to their manyata. She is 19 and is the first of her 6 siblings to join university. She credits her success to her mother ensuring she had sanitary towels every time she is on her menses. However, not every girl is lucky like her, and many are said to have dropped out of school due to lack of pads.
Wakati ingine hakuna pesa, so mtu unapata hakuna mahali utatoa pads, unatafuta rafiki kijana na kubaia pads, alafu ndio sasa usurvive. Unapata wengine wanatoka shule kabla hawajamaliza.
You've told me about leaders that you know who are women and you want to be like them.
Leshan Kereto is a Moran and a student at Egerton University. He has been vocal in campaigning against FGM and early marriages in his community here. And his visit alongside other young Maasai men targeted more than 200 girls to talk about menstrual hygiene and sexual reproductive health, topics considered taboo for men here.
I come from a community that is, the men are a bit far from the women and the girls. I think we are in a century where we need to take care of our own. I think it's about time that everyone takes initiative to make sure that all our sisters and girls and girlfriends and mothers, as well as everyone else who is female and is facing all these problems, is well taken care of. As much as I am a gentleman and I come from this culture, I think it's also my responsibility. So I want to see them doing well. I want to see them being happy. I don't want them to undergo the problems that come with FGM.
Government officials saying the pandemic has only served to aggravate an already dire situation.
We are fighting on FGM. We are fighting, that is early marriage, especially hii nyakati ya corona. Kabla hizi sipatikane, unapata vitu mingi zinatumika, especially on the period time. The old clothes, blanketi zinakatwa, mattresses zinakatwa, na wale hawana mattresses like the community wanatumia some of the branches kama ile leshwa kama unajua. So unapata imekuwa ni jambo ambayo imekataza watoto kwenda shule.
For Leshan and his team, they believe it is time for men in the Maa community to be at the heart of empowering their women.
Kuna mambo ya period, msasi labda ungetaka kusikia mambo ya msichana yako, lakini sasa tunawaeleza as a parent mwanaume ya kwamba ni vitu utakuwa unajua.
Very encouraging to see the men involved in this conversation, menstrual hygiene management, and definitely we advocate for more men to join in on the same. And speaking of which, as I mentioned, Friday marks the Menstrual Hygiene Day, a day that aims to raise awareness on the challenges girls and women face as a result of menstruation and helps to break the silence by highlighting lasting solution. Now, speaking of which, did you know that the date May the 28th was actually chosen to observe the day because on an average the menstrual cycle for most women is 28 days and the menstruation period for most women is for 5 days. Hence the date was kept as 28th, which is the 28th day of May. Now you know. And to help us engage further into this conversation is Janet Mule, who is a Principal Public Health Officer, Ministry of Health, joining us in studio. In the other studio, we have James Satito, who is a menstrual hygiene management champion, and he calls himself the period man. And of course, joining us virtually is Janet Mbogwa, who is the founder Inua Dada Foundation and also the author of My First Time. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation. And I was seeing you, Janet Mulel, smiling as you watched that report about the Morans. Why?
Thank you very much, Gladys. I was glad to see male involvement in the issues of menstruation because, as we all know, this has been a taboo subject which has been left only for men, only for women and girls, because apparently they are the ones that menstruate. So men shy away from even the word menstruation. I think even today, as we talk about menstruation, there are some people who really wonder, what is this we are talking in national TV? So I'm very happy to see men involvement, and I'm glad also that we have one of the male champions in this show today.
Yeah, and speaking of which, period man, when you see other men joining in on this cause, how does that make you feel?
Well, I must admit that it is quite encouraging because this is an issue that not very many men would really want to engage in based on the different engagements that I've been having in the community. So hearing that or seeing that men are coming out to support the cause on menstrual hygiene management is really quite giving hope that we are going to break this silence sooner or later.
Okay, now the national theme for this year, that is for the Menstrual Hygiene Day, is using the slogan TBI, which invites boys to join the conversation and break the silence around menstruation. Janet, when you see that you started off with women, rallying women, and now you've got men behind this cause, what does that mean to you? That's now Janet Mbogwa. Sorry, we have two Janets.
We have two Janets today. Thank you, Gladys. Great to see Janet and James as well, period champions. It's always so exciting to see. And Gladys, also thank you for mainstreaming this conversation. I think this is how we begin to progress the agenda, by mainstreaming it on a platform like this. Yeah, I think initially with the work we were doing, it was mobilizing women and girls because they are the most affected. But what happens is we do live in a patriarchal society. And so a lot of the time, the gatekeepers of cultural stigma and taboo, whether it's unconscious, bias, or intentional, are the men. You know, the cultural leaders, the heads of the home, the heads of the church, etc. So they perpetuate the stigma. They perpetuate the preconceived notions. So getting them as allies, having conversations with them and saying, when a woman menstruates or a girl menstruates, doesn't mean she's dirty. It doesn't mean she doesn't belong in the place of worship. It doesn't mean she's unable to perform her tasks. It means she's going through a very natural biological process. So please, let's treat her as such. And so when the men are on board and included, everyone wins, because now we're all on the same page and taking and being cognizant about the fact that it is a human rights violation that has affected so many women, girls, and families. Can we now address it collectively, including men, including everyone, persons who are differently abled, etc. When everyone is included, everyone wins. That's what I want to say about that.
Very well said. And Janet Mbogwa now mentions the fact that this is a human right. And most people do not look at it that way. Yet it is a biological happening that happens to us every single month. Why and how, from your experience?
Well, Gladys, as we know, human rights are their standards that allow all people to live with dignity, to live with justice, and also freedom. So we know when girls and women do not menstruate with dignity, when they have lack of access to water, infrastructure, soap, and also the menstrual hygiene solutions, then they cannot menstruate with dignity, they are ashamed, and they are not free to interact with the others, including some of them may not even be able to go to places of worship. And so their human right to freedom of association, their human right to dignity is violated. Yeah.
Okay, and period man, I saw you came with a few paraphernalia to just help us understand what it is that girls need and what we will hear now that not all girls can actually access the same. Could you show us what you have?
Well, thank you. I think as I'm going to just show what I've come up with, is that it is important to mention that in a community where I'm working in, I come from a community-based organization known as Stretchers Youth Organization. And in Mombasa, we've had collective responsibilities in terms of partners and stakeholders coming in to support the strategies put in place by the county government of Mombasa and even other counties that I've visited. So at an institution level, we have engagements that we usually do to bring young people, both male and female, and even parents and male caregivers, to discuss issues around menstrual hygiene management. And whenever we conduct community engagements, we call them the youth villages or community youth villages. We go with different materials to demonstrate and showcase the girls, because many girls have grown up knowing the disposable sanitary pads, and they don't have other choices that they can use. And whenever you distribute even the pads, you hear some girls complain of irritation, of itching on specific products. So we always sensitize them on different menstrual products, and ranging from the disposable pads that are widely known, like the normal pads that they use. We also sensitize them that there is need also to think about the reusable products. We have different institutions or companies that manufacture these products, but based on the lack of guidelines and standards on reusable menstrual products, they are not easily accessible in the markets, in the supermarkets, in the shops. But it is important for girls to know that other than the disposable menstrual products, we also have reusable menstrual products, such as these reusable pads. We also have the menstrual cups that have a lot of controversies, especially in the community where I'm coming from, Mombasa, because these are insertable menstrual products that some girls don't feel actually comfortable using them. We also have the tampons that some girls find very conducive to use during menstruation. And so whenever we are passing information, it is an issue of what choices can girls have other than the normal menstrual products that they know. And when talking about menstrual products and accessibility, we need to move out of just the pads and the panties, for example. We need to talk about products that can be able to be used by girls to ease pain management, for example. Because a lot of girls experiences a lot of pain during menstruation. And this is a component of menstrual health that is not really discussed, even whenever partners go to the field to distribute the menstrual products. And as we explain the kind of menstrual disorders that are there, we normally engage them using visuals. We have images that we always engage. And maybe just to illustrate.
Okay, period man, let me
Yes.
stop you at that point because we'll delve into that in just a moment. Allow me to bring in Janet Mbogwa. And a lot of what has been demonstrated by the period man also points to the fact that most girls and women cannot access this because of the economic cost or impact of the same, which brings about period poverty. Talk about this.
Yeah, thanks, Gladys. I like that Period Man has actually shown a wide range of menstrual products. That's important. Let girls and women have a choice. Show them how to use it safely, dispose of it safely, wash it safely, etc. Period poverty is one of, I think, the most indignifying forms in the world, because it means that women many times are forced to choose between food and sanitary products around the world. I'm talking about Colorado in the US, Scotland. I'm talking about Australia, Los Angeles, Nepal, Uganda, Kenya. The period poverty is actually a global issue because globally, period products are expensive. Now, expensive is relative, right? But because they are priced within a range that is comparative to either piecemeal shopping for the home in terms of food, in terms of other home necessities, then that's where the competition comes in. And so period poverty means that many times women and girls are forced to use either unsanitary products or forced to stay home and not attend school. And if it's a woman, she's not sure how to go about day-to-day job. And so when you think about the greater implication, you have less participation of women and girls, whether it's in school or in the workplace. It does come round to affect the economy. Now, data is still kind of new in this space, by the way, Gladys. It's, I think, one of the most under-researched spaces in the world. I think one of the most prominent pieces of research that was done was last year by a Polish philanthropist called Dominika Kulczyk. And she was just asking herself, she wants to take part in ending menstrual equity. She couldn't find data. She couldn't find anything. And she realized not only is it under-researched, it's underfunded. So there's not enough investment, right? And so if we are not going to look at menstrual health on a national scale, on a scale that is a development issue, we will find ourselves here having this conversation again next year. And for me, that's what bugs me, because don't we care enough for half the population in the world to allow them to menstruate with dignity, to allow them to better afford products? Because if they don't, that's the poverty that then exists. They can't go to school, they can't fend for themselves, etc. So period poverty, the only ways that it can really end is if we're going to make products more accessible or free, like in the case of New Zealand or Scotland, or if we're going to have more investment in addressing menstrual equity issues. That's what we need to be looking at.
Okay, and Janet Mule, Kenya was the first country back in May of 2020 to actually develop a standalone MHM policy and strategy. What is the role and impact of the same today?
Thank you, Gladys. Yes, we have the menstrual hygiene policy and strategy, which was launched last year. And this policy provides an implementation framework for menstrual hygiene management in Kenya. It also identifies roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders, because as we say, everyone must come so that we can be able to ensure that our girls and women menstruate with dignity. So it, of course, states the roles of government, roles of private sector, the role of the church, the role of different ministries, and also the roles of the women themselves. And I think this far we have done well, because as you have seen, and from the period man, we are talking about information. We are talking about breaking the silence around menstruation. And when we break silence, we also ensure that girls and women know which options are there, and they can be able to make informed decisions on what to use. And the policy also provides an enabling environment for advocacy. And we have been able to identify champions in county first ladies on menstrual hygiene. And we've seen them support also to mobilize resources in their own counties to support girls and women in menstruation. And so we've also been able to develop other documents like standards, guidelines for wash infrastructure in schools, because we cannot just talk about menstrual hygiene solutions. We also need an enabling environment so that these same materials are disposed in hygienic manner. Yes.
Okay, and speaking about the impact of the same, Janet, you have gone, Janet Mbogwa, you have gone on record saying that MHM policy and strategy is a step in the right direction, but a lot needs to be done. What do you mean by this?
Yes, I think, I mean, we truly appreciate the work that the Ministry of Health has done in really trying to put a lot of thought and leadership into discussing menstrual health, the launching of the framework. But when it comes to implementation, public discourse, that's what needs to now happen very intentionally, very aggressively, because I think it's safe to say Kenya is the poster child for policies. I mean, the world over, we have some of the best policies in the world. But I think where we tend to struggle, and if I can narrow down again to what we're talking about, is implementation. Now, I know it's not going to be overnight. We're not asking for change overnight. I think what we're asking for is a lot more intentional implementation and public discourse in order to fast track the implementation that was outlined in the framework. Without the implementation, all we have is a beautiful policy that sits on our desks and gathers dust and is not necessarily being translated into what next needs to be done. Now, I know the framework was launched smack in the middle of the pandemic. Yes. I know that there's been several conversations, webinars or in person that have been used to try and get the discourse going, but it's slow. And I feel like if we are passionate about ensuring speedy access to information and products, we would take it as almost as a matter of urgency. And really, we've been talking about menstrual health. From 2013 is when the needle shifted a little bit in Kenya when this matter was mainstreamed. And it's what kind of motivated the 2015 framework to begin being discussed. But I always think to myself, if this was a matter of urgency, again, we would have made greater progress. But as long as it's seen as hizo vitu za wanawake na wasichana, or as long as it's continues to be shrouded in taboo, continues to be shrouded with people saying, why are you talking about this thing so openly? It's a very private matter. As long as we keep doing that, I want us to remember that that is costing millions of lives around the world not to progress. So we need to look at it as a national development issue. If we're going to implement it, let's do it effectively. Let's do it urgently. Let's do it with a multi-stakeholder approach, public sector, private sector, schools, religious leaders. I don't know if I've used this analogy before, Gladys, and I sometimes wonder if it's problematic. Not sure which platform I used it on. But if the way the HIV/AIDS was tackled, right? If we look at that matter of urgency and investment that was used, then we need to also consider gender-based violence and menstrual health the same. Otherwise, it will keep being this thing that we discuss in small silos every once a year, and then we continue. No more. Let's now push for urgent implementation and action now, so that women, girls, and families are able to start thriving now.
And actually, the pandemic we're in is another example of the agency and resources that have been shifted to the same. And at this point, I think it will be prudent for us to take up your feedback, even as we asked you, what is the biggest impediment or greatest impediment to actually accessing menstrual products, whether it's the pads, tampons, or the menstrual cup, as Period Man has actually shown us. And your feedback is coming through. Zippy Peter says, the cost in exclamation mark. The pads are way too expensive for a common mwananchi struggling to put food on the table. Esau says money, then some rural areas products pia haziko. Another here from Thomas Halu who says money, again, resources. Christabel says availability of tampons in some supermarkets. We hear you, Christabel. And Kipngeno Skay here says, what is the role of women reps at the county level? In fact, they should be the ones pushing our girls to a comfortable life through creating platforms and even bills at the national government to make access of sanitary pads for free. Kipngeno, you have a point there. And actually, Janet, you mentioned that you've been able to recruit first ladies in different counties to also join in on this cause. How has this helped along the process?
Thank you, Gladys. Now, as I said, we have county first ladies who have been sensitized on menstrual hygiene management. And they have taken up the role of breaking the silence in their own counties, and also mobilizing resources to support girls and women in their own counties. An example is the County First Lady of Makueni, and also the County First Lady of Kwale. There are several activities that they are implementing on menstrual hygiene, including giving sanitary products to girls and women, especially the vulnerable women and girls. And these first ladies have not left behind the boys. They have also been able to identify items which they can give the boys. And this creates a platform to talk about menstruation to both boys and girls, to men and women in their own counties. And of course, we have also been able to commemorate menstrual hygiene days in their counties, in Makueni, in Kwale, and in others. And these are events in which we raise awareness of menstrual hygiene management and the need to support girls and women, and the need to break the silence around menstruation.
And I hear we have Joram from Siaya on the phone with a question or comment as we prepare him to join us. The impact of the pandemic clearly cannot be understated, and especially the economic impact. And this has now impacted on menstrual hygiene management. How does it look like in Mombasa County, man?
Well, in Mombasa County, the cry that is always there is about access. It's about access to information on menstrual hygiene management and access to products, services, and facilities. That is the cry that that girl in our community looks for. As much as we talk about enabling environment for the government, for stakeholders to even implement programs at the community level, the issue of access, we cannot shy away from it, is that a lot of girls cannot access these menstrual products at the cost that they can afford. And the reason why we don't have accessibility in some places is because the taxation, for example, we've talked about multi-sectoral approach to the sustainable solutions that we need, is that even the Ministry of Trade need to be part of this, because we talk about zero rating raw materials of menstrual products, but once the product is made, the product is still taxed at 16%. The cost of establishing these businesses is still high at county level, at licensing the businesses. So this pushes the price of the commodity high, and unless we address that component, then accessibility in terms of how much the cost of the pads are, it will still be difficult for that common mwananchi. So as much as we partners strive to distribute products to the vulnerable girls, the coordination at county level is still not at par. And that is one component that the county governments really need to work on. Mobilization of partners. A lot of resources are there, but the coordination is not at par. What we need currently is a consolidated effort. Partner A and Partner B have some resources to implement a program. They need to come together. And the person to bring these people together is the government through the mobilization strategies that are there. So unless partners work together and develop sustainable programs, it is still going to be very difficult to reach the person who needs this product most. And as much as the Ministry of Education has programmed to distribute sanitary pads to schools, it is still not all-inclusive. We're talking about social inclusion, we're addressing menstrual hygiene. The persons with disability have a lot of challenges. I have a friend of mine who, they cannot use the normal menstrual product that I've demonstrated here. She has a condition called bipolar. What she says is that she needs a product that can accommodate the menstrual blood, the stool, and the urine at the same time. The normal sanitary pads cannot do that. And they are left with an option of using the adult diapers. These are issues that even manufacturers have not yet figured out on how to come up with this kind of things. Therefore, we need to create room for innovation so that manufacturers are also able to produce products that are responsive to every kind of person that needs to use these products.
Valid points there. And we have Joram back with us from Siaya County. What's your question or comment?
Janet, my name is Joram Nyanga.
What's your question or comment?
Yeah, my comment is, at this point in time, post-independence, we are not supposed to be having discussion about menstrual health. Yes, the government is supposed to have come up with strategies that can support the girl child from wherever they are. We are not supposed to be talking about access of sanitary facilities, sanitary towels, while we can easily access condoms from everywhere, including in bars and toilets. How does it become easy for a government or other civil society organizations to procure stuff like condoms, and it becomes difficult for them to support the girl child with sanitary towels?
Okay, very, very well said. Thank you for calling in and supporting this conversation. Janet, I see you nodding. And as you mentioned, there are some countries like New Zealand that have gone ahead and ensured that every woman and girl everywhere can access these pads. So what are these best practices perhaps we need to borrow from these countries?
First of all, again, great that, we have conversations and insights from people like Joram. I think just constituents who want to see better for all girls and women. When it comes to Scotland and New Zealand, I remember interacting with somebody briefly before the pandemic from Scotland, and they were beginning to explain what it is. At the time, the pads weren't yet fully free, but they were working towards it. But they said the members of parliament took the initiative, they took it upon themselves to collectively see it as an issue. So the best practices are investment and interest and goodwill. So sorry, I'm home. So if you hear children screaming, please bear with me. So the goodwill of members of parliament themselves and government leaders in different institutions to say, okay, let's sit down and talk about how we can actually create access for all. That's what stood out for me, is that she said everyone was on the same page. Men, women, it didn't matter. The members of parliament and leaders at some of the highest government levels were on the same page. It wasn't just some cabinet secretaries or some MPs. It was a collective will from participants and leaders to say, this really ought to be something that we do away with. And so through that, the process took lobbying. It took some cost. I know that there is a little bit of a cost also on the side of the government to ensure that this access is free for girls and women. And we're still learning more about how they were able to end up saying they're going to be free and that the rollout will be coming soon. But I know they started this conversation back about 2-3 years ago. And here we are. They were consistent, intentional. They participated with everyone, the public, with the MPs. And they came together and said, right, let's now sign this into law and make sure that girls and women are able to access products for free. The question we need to ask is why other governments are not doing the same.
Good
and it goes back to to how much are we invested in wanting the best for girls and women? Because that's where they came from. That's where New Zealand came from as well.
All right. And as we mentioned, that the theme for this year is actually focusing on putting a lot of investment and resources into MHM across the world. And Janet, I'll ask you the question that Joram threw our way. Why is it that we have a government that can make condoms accessible to everyone, but this particular thing that girls and women need for a monthly occurrence is not accessible?
Thank you. And thank you, Joram, for that question. Actually, it's a very genuine concern. And as we have heard, our policy is very new. Actually, before 2014, in Kenya here, no one used to talk about menstrual hygiene management. Until now, we marked the first menstrual hygiene management day in 2014. And across the years, over the years from 2014 to this year, we are marking the Menstrual Hygiene Management Day. And I think this is an opportunity even for government to be able to get back to track and recognize the needs of women and girls. So what I can say is that all is not lost. There is something that is happening in government, and we have also been able to establish a menstrual hygiene management task force. Somebody talked about the need to involve the Ministry of Trade and other line ministries that are relevant. So we are doing something as government in terms of coordination, because that's one of the strategic focus areas, coordination of all the partners. And I believe now that we are also giving sanitary pads to girls through the Ministry of Education. I know this is not adequate. There is room for improvement. And we also call upon the private sector and well-wishers also to support this cause. Of course, we know menstruating can be expensive. Yes, we have free sanitary pads, and lately in the pandemic, we are giving masks. Menstruation is expensive, so it's not something that we should leave to government alone. We should be able to pull together religious leaders, private sector, CSOs, and of course, under the leadership of government to ensure that menstruating with dignity for girls and women in Kenya is made a reality.
Now, period mind education around MHM is so critical, and that's why you are also mentioning the fact that as much as we educate the women and girls about menstrual hygiene, we also have to talk about the other components that come with the cycle, and we're talking about menstrual disorders. So how have you been addressing this?
Well, thank you, Gladys. And I would like to mention that the multi-sectoral approach that we are talking about here needs to be looked at different lenses. We don't need to look at implementation of programs as competition from partners. For example, the problem that we're talking about here is if the period man is implementing something on menstrual health and Gladys is also doing the same, why can't they work together? Why do they have to look at each other as a competitor to a level where they cannot even call each other to do something, save resources and reach even a bigger community? That has been kind of the problem that we're talking about, and the lack of the coordination that I've been stressing on. But when we talk about the other components of menstrual health that we are not targeting, we have a lot of girls who believe that period pain is normal, while you and I would know that there is a level of pain that is not actually very normal. We have a lot of girls suffering in silence because they don't have access to the accurate information. They don't have knowledge on even how to manage the period pains. So whenever we go to the field, we showcase this kind of a table. This has different conditions that different girls face in silence. So we are able to demonstrate and show them that that period pain or that excessive bleeding could be as a result of either of these conditions. So the challenge that comes in with this kind of information is that a girl would ask you, now I've been menstruating, I've been having period for the last 1 month, non-stop. Where do I go for diagnosis? The coordination aspect comes in, that the Ministry of Health, for example, we don't have a specific designated area or places where girls can go to access services on this kind of disorder and even diagnosis. We've had foundations like, for example, the Endometriosis Foundation of Kenya, doing a lot of sensitization on endometriosis aspect of this kind of condition. But other components are not captured, are not addressed, and it leaves girls with a lot of pain, a lot of challenges that we really need to address. Unless we address also these other components, then it is going to be difficult to actually achieve the gender equality that we're talking about. We need to look at it from all dimensions. The pain management aspect of it, the collection of data that Janet Mbugua is talking about. We need to know how we can monitor even the interventions that we are implementing at the community level. As at now, even the DHIS, the health management system, does not even have the indicators to track the implementation of the programs that are being done by partners in different counties. So if we just sit down, interrogate and look at the policy that we currently have, then develop different structure based on different counties, then we'll be able to track the programs that counties are implementing, that the partners are implementing, so that we can be able to have sustainable programs all the way to achieving the gender equality.
And I see Janet Mule is really shaking her head in agreement. And that's why I'd like to ask, because I know there is the MHM Teachers Training Handbook that has now brought in the education of the same in schools. Can we also include menstrual disorders in this conversation in school so that the girls know both components of the cycle?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have the Menstrual Hygiene Management Teachers Handbook to be launched actually on 20th as we commemorate the Menstrual Hygiene Day. And to some extent, we have talked about menstrual disorders in that book, because remember, this is a book to be used in primary schools, so where primary schools where the girls are not able to understand some of the details about endometriosis and the rest of the issues. Yeah, but we also expect to continue sensitizing teachers, because we've already started a training actually around one of the prongs of menstrual hygiene, which is breaking silence. We have sensitized teachers across the country. And of course, before we went to the counties, we work with the Ministry of Education, and we have a desk officer in the Ministry of Education who also deals with matters menstrual hygiene management. And yes, we are also have materials to break silence and talk about what happens. And the period man has already shown those charts, so I will not be able to show them today. And yes, this information is there, that and not only girls who suffer menstrual pain, even women, because we are talking about girls and women. So once this information is out there through our training, through our schools, then we hope it will be able to get out to the community. And I was very happy with what he was talking about counties, about county coordination. Of course, counties have a role to play in ensuring menstrual hygiene management is realized in our communities, in their counties. And so that coordination at county level is very important. And we have already done dissemination of this policy, the MHM policy and strategy, in about 30 counties. Remember, this policy was launched last year. And after dissemination, we are supporting counties to domesticate, as we talked about context. We have different cultures in different counties, and so we do not expect the policy to be implemented as it is from Kajiado to Turkana. We expect county governments to be able to come together and domesticate and set up an implementation plan and also a monitoring framework for menstrual hygiene work in their own counties.
All right. Now, the Menstrual Hygiene Day, as we mentioned, is coming up on the 28th day of this month, which is this Friday. And a lot of activities have been planned around the same, including one that will be launched from Kibra. And speaking of which, we are joined by Yasmin Mohammed on the phone. She is an MHM champion from Kibra. Yasmin, you're talking about a cycling that is connected to the Menstrual Hygiene Day. Tell us more about it.
Thank you very much for the wonderful conversation I've been following around. And on Friday in Kibra, we'll be celebrating World Menstrual Hygiene Day through having the menstrual cycling and festival. So our menstrual cycle will be a non-biological process whereby we'll engage riders and move around, or rather ride around the informal settlement of Kibra with the aim of breaking menstrual taboos, silence, and see on how we can tackle stigma, as well as recognize menstrual champions. And the menstrual cycling activity will also enable us, or rather assist us in raising awareness as well as fundraising for menstrual health products that will facilitate in ending period poverty in the informal settlement of Kibra.
All right. And what time does this start, and how are people getting recruited in the process?
Pardon?
How do you get, or how can you be part of the process?
Also, all riders, or rather if you want to join and support the initiative, we have the registration fee of 1,000 shillings or 10 USD dollars for you to participate in the menstrual cycling activity. And the fee is actually catering for facilitation of menstrual health products and establishment of more pad dispensers, because we've heard Joram talking about condom dispensers. So last year we innovated a pad dispenser out of a used water jerry can. And we were thinking of when we implement the menstrual cycling activity, we'll be able to come up with a more digital pad dispensers that will be distributed in different wards in the informal settlement of Kibra for our girls and women to be able to access menstrual products in a dignified and equitable manner.
All right, Yasmin Mohammed, MHM champion from Kibra, we celebrate you and thank you for joining us and letting us know of this event that will be happening on May 28th and marking the Menstrual Hygiene Day. I see Janet Mugwe is all smiles. Even as we bring this conversation to a close, as I mentioned, the theme or the global theme this year for this day is more action and investment in menstrual health and hygiene. Now, your parting shot.
Yeah. I know Gladys is like, keep it short. I'm smiling because I started in Wadada in 2014. And as Janet Mule said, we were part of the first Menstrual Hygiene Day commemoration. I think I'm smiling because all these years later, to see people like James Atito, Period Man, and Yasmin, who is the founder of Superb CBO, and she's doing such incredible work on the ground. It makes me happy that we are mobilizing more and more menstrual champions, because I think the more we have, the more champions and advocates we have, the stronger the agency is and the more work is being done. So that's why I was smiling, because I think that's a win, is that we have more local, national and global champions. It's now become a global issue in the mainstream. I think my parting shot is everything that we've said in this conversation, I believe can fall into 3 or 4 I's, which is information, investment, inclusion, and implementation. We could talk about periods all day. I know I can. I absolutely am passionate about this space, but there's so many surrounding issues that if we don't get this kind of umbrella way of covering them, that's when we'll continue to not capture everything. And I think James alluded to it. When he talked about multi-stakeholder and not competing, that's true. How do we combine all our strengths and all our knowledge to create something that has greater impact, as opposed to the several varied, sporadic conversations and activations? That's not sustainable, which is why I commend Scotland and New Zealand for what they've done, is that they've said, at the helm, as the government, we are going to ensure that these products and that this information is free and accessible, which means it will address so many issues around disorders, around teen pregnancy, because that's also closely linked with menstrual health. So if we don't have the information, inclusion, implementation, and investment, we're going to keep having sporadic ad hoc conversations, which have minimal impact. There's still impact. Let's understand that over these last few years being in the foundation, I've seen the scale of impact. I've seen the rise in conversations to even having this on a breakfast show. That is massive. I know that when I was on TV, we were only in 2013, I think, is when we had the first conversation. Before then, you couldn't even try. So that's big. Let's celebrate the small wins. Let's celebrate that there is a framework and a policy. That's great. What we now need to do is push for the investment, implementation, and information and inclusion. And my final parting shot is, in as much as there's the teacher's handbooks, there's so many incredible resources. Doris Murimi has done a book called Menstrual Disorders. She's focused only on menstrual disorders. She's Kenyan. I know she's trying to make sure that it's mainstreamed in schools. I've read the book. It's incredible. My First Time is the book I've written, and I wrote it because I wanted to show everyone, what does the face of menstruation look like collectively? What about a woman who's blind? A woman who's living with disability? A woman whose daughter has Down syndrome? What about a woman who was a child bride? All those stories, a woman who's in prison. The inclusion aspect is important. Those are all the stories I cover in my book, which will be available in pre-order this week. There's so many resources, Gladys. Let's encourage the ministry that, as much as they are focusing on these incredible resources that they are launching in their schools, have supporting resources and have supporting roles played by advocates, champions, agents of change. When we're all included, we all win. That's my parting shot.
Thank you, Janet. Period, man. I know the counties play a huge role in this one because health is a devolved unit. Your parting shot?
Well, my parting shot is that we need to move from political will to political action. Political action will lead to enactment of the laws that we need and investment, setting aside budget for implementation of menstrual hygiene policy in this country. Then the counties need to mobilize the partners. We still have potential to mobilize the partners who are doing amazing work, like Yasmin. We have also Mr. Pads in Kibra doing amazing work. This is another young man doing this kind of work. And the platforms that other partners are creating, you see, just getting that platform where you have an audience to disseminate information is very important to enable us break this stigma. And these platforms, we've been getting them for the likes like, you know, Swahili Pot is a hub in Mombasa where a lot of young people, young men get there to just get information. And when we have these platforms, it is possible for us to really break these taboos and the myth that around menstrual hygiene management. And as an institution, as I conclude, at Stretchers, we are still committed into ensuring that we reach as many young people as possible because we believe that sustainable solutions can be gotten from household level. When a father or a brother at household level is empowered, knows very well that my sister is supposed to get menstrual products every month, then I don't even need to wait for the government to buy the pads. I will take that responsibility as a brother, access these products and provide them to my sister, support them during the period pains, just ensuring that they have very comfortable environment at household level. When we all do that, we will all win. As Janet Mbugu has mentioned, we don't lose anything as men when we support gender equality issue.
Very well said. And of course, Janet Mule, a lot of responsibility falls on the national government. Yes, we have steps in the right direction. What more can we expect?
I think what I can say, just like the theme goes, we need more action, both at national level and also at county level. We need enhanced coordination at county level. I think for now it's a bit weak. Of course, it's not uniform for all the counties. Some counties are doing better than others. And so we need, as the period man has said, we have partners there and we have resources out there in the counties, but they need leadership, which must be provided by government. So county government need to provide that leadership, and also to come up with an implementation plan of the policy and also monitoring framework so that we can be able to assess where we are and where we are going and how far we've gone. Because this policy is supposed to come to an end in 2030. So by 2030, we are supposed to have ensured that we have no girl who is not going to school because of menstrual periods. We have no women who cannot go to church because of they are embarrassed because they are menstruating. We are supposed to ensure that the three prongs around menstrual hygiene policy are implemented.
So clearly it's tick-tock to 2030, even as we eradicate some of these things that are holding back women when it comes to menstrual hygiene management. Janet Mule, Principal Public Health Officer at the Ministry of Health. James Atito, who is an MHM champion, calling himself a period man. And of course, Janet Mbugu, who is the founder of Inua Dada Foundation and the author of My First Time. Thank you all for being part of this conversation, bringing us up to speed as to where we are at and what more needs to be done when it comes to menstrual hygiene management. Well, we take a short break on Your World. When we come back, we get to understand the connection between agribusiness and environmental sustainability. We'll be right back.